So our last topic for this unit is solving equations that contain fractions. And the key to this is finding the least common denominator and multiplying all the parts by that least common denominator. And what happens then is it makes our fractions cancel. So here we go. Looking across my denominators, for number 1, I need a common denominator of 6x. So I take every part of my equation, 1 over x times 6x over 1, plus 1/3 times 6x over 1 equals 3 over 2x times 6x over 1 minus 1 over 1 times 6x over 1. So I make this huge mess, and it's terrifying. But now all of my denominators will cancel out, and I'll be left with a basic equation to solve. So you need to make the big mess so that it will clean up pretty quickly. And that's always the scariest part of solving these equations. Multiply every single piece by that common denominator, and then all of your denominators will cancel out. And again, we only do this because it's an equation. It has an equal to sign in it. So here we go. Cancel the x's, and I'm left with a 6. Cancel 3. It divides into 6 twice, and I'm left with plus 2x. And that equals, here the x's cancel, and 2 divides into 6 3 times, so I'm left with 9. And finally, I have nothing to cancel. 1 times 6x is negative 6x. And look, there's an equation that I've been solving for years. Now you just find x, check it, and you're done. So again, you make the big mess, multiply every single piece of your equation by the least common denominator. That will cancel all the denominators, and then just solve as usual. So here I add 6x to both sides, subtract 6, and divide by 8. So finally, I think my answer is 3/8. And I say I think because you need to check these. Often in Algebra 2, you'll get roots that don't work. Extraneous roots, they're called. So use your Inspire, store that value to check, and I'll remind you of how to do that next. So on your Inspire, you want to store your answer. So I'm going to say x colon equals the button next to 9, and my answer, I think, is 3/8. Use those fraction templates, they're wonderful. And then you type the original equation before you did anything to it. Remember, when you're checking in equals, you use the equal to sign that's under the control button. As soon as you push enter, you get true, which means it checks. Alright, next problem. Again, we need to find the common denominator so we can multiply all parts by it. So I scan my denominators and I see I need to include x plus 2. I need to include x, and I need to factor x squared plus 2x to see what its factors are. And they're x and x plus 2. I've already included each of those in my common denominator, so I don't need to include them a second time. No one's feelings have been hurt. So I take each piece of my equation, x over x plus 2, multiply it by your common denominator, equals 3 over x, multiply it by your common denominator, plus 4 over x times x plus 2, multiply it by your least common denominator. Again, this makes a big mess and it's really scary, but in the next step, all those denominators cancel and you're left with an equation that you know how to solve. So first I have x squared equals, my x's cancel and I distribute the 3 through, and I have 3x plus 6. And there, my denominators cancel everything, and I'm left with 4. On the right, I combine 6 and 4. X squared equals 3x plus 10. And now we have a quadratic to solve. Set it equal to 0 and factor. This is from our prerequisite chapter again. So once you've set your equation equal to 0, factor, set both of your factors equal to 0, and solve. So for this particular problem, x could be 5, because x minus 5 equals 0, and x could be negative 2, because x plus 2 equals 0. Now again, you need to check, and right away you need to notice that you have to reject your x equals negative 2. This is why, from the first day of our fractions unit, we've looked at denominators and we've said, what would break it? If you look at the original denominator, x over x plus 2, x cannot be negative 2. So, you need to look at that x minus equals negative 2 and reject it right away. You don't erase it, you just say, uh-oh, that breaks my fraction, and put an x through it to reject it. 5 does not break a fraction, so I think it's an answer, but again, we're going to check on our Inspire. I'll show you that in the next part. Fast forward if you'd like. Make sure you do know how to check on your Inspire. So again, the first thing you do is store your answer in your variable x equals 5, and then you type the original equation exactly as it looks. Yay, it checks. And you're done. Have a great night. That's our last new lesson of the chapter. See you tomorrow.